Hello everyone, welcome to the webinar. My name is Mark Beresford, I'm Head of Retail Payments Practice at Edgar, Dunn. We're going to run through a short presentation summary of the annual European Retailers Survey. This is now in its fifth year, and I've got the pleasure of welcoming Andrew Quartermain, Vice President of SaaS Solutions at ACI, who have kindly sponsored the retailer survey this year.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, very happy to join this WebEx with you all. I think from an ACI perspective, the work that's gone into this survey, from our perspective, helps to validate a lot of our product strategy. It gives us a lot of insight into what's happening into the retail vertical, and specifically because it's Europe. Europe is a key market for us, and we're very keen to glean as much information as we can from your work and from other work which is done by other folks. So thank you, Mark.
So without further ado, I'll just go on to the methodology. We set up the online survey. We've done this, as I say, 5 years now, and we've got quite a comprehensive set of questions online. We invite retailers towards the end of the year. Invite retailers across Europe to participate. It's about 400 retailers were asked to participate. Quite a range of retailers, mainly large, tier 1, multi-channel retailers operating a variety of channels, sales channels, web stores, apps, etc. Mainly serving national and international consumers. So it's quite a diverse set of participants, ranging from retailers, petrol retailers, online-only retailers, general merchandise, grocery, fashion, hotels, etc. And to add to the online survey, we also conduct telephone interviews with a number of our clients and retailers within the market, to understand a little bit more about the background to the online survey results that we're going to share with you today. So just to summarise the key findings, we've over the last 5 years we've conducted the survey. We have found there's been a gradual shift from serving consumers across multiple channels to serving consumers across using a multiple channel model, but now we're finding omni-channel is really the modus of operandi now, and retailers acknowledge the importance of payment as being the heart of that strategy. They recognise the importance of consumers will spend more if they shop across different channels, across different touch points of the retail brand, and also if they experience a consistent offering across those channels. However, we have found, and we've seen from the survey results, there are challenges that are in achieving a truly omni-channel operation, and they remain to be constant year in, year out. And as we will see, we'll expand on some of those challenges and how retailers are dealing with them. So let's just pick up on the first areas. Retailers are embracing omni-channel and the omni-channel shopper. It's interesting, in previous years we've not seen this high percentage of participants saying it's either got an omni-channel offering or developing their omni-channel offering. But it's interesting that increasing sales is a key benefit. Improving customer experience and satisfaction are also coming up as very, very high benefits in terms of the participants. We've found, just talking to some of our clients, that as much as 30% incremental size of the shopper's basket, the value of the basket, is seen to be of a great benefit when serving customers across different channels in a consistent way. I think, Andrew, I'm going to ask you around some of the challenges that you're seeing with your clients around data integration and the cost of the omnichannel strategy.
Yeah, I think certainly concur with a lot of the results that come from this survey. I think the direct experience we have by dealing directly with merchants is kind of twofold. So, and touching back on some of the points you raised earlier, I think omnichannel has been here for some time and is in effect not new. What is new is that I think merchants and retailers generally are looking to provide a holistic picture of how customers should interact with them. So it's not only about the purchase, but it's about all the other things that are associated with that purchase, which is important. And I think as part of that, data integration and the ability to track customers across potentially, different payments infrastructures is absolutely key. But coming back on some of the challenges regarding to costs, I think I would say some of the observations we have directly from dealing with merchants is, it's not universal across the entire retail space whether merchants truly understand their costs. And I think that is one of the big things which retailers are now focusing on, because they know that to implement new solutions, there's got to be some very strong ROIs which are created, and that can be difficult to create if they don't truly understand their costs across multiple geographies. And that's why I think the Europe model here that you worked on is so important, because there are fundamental differences with how payments are managed country by country for many retailers, and they're seeking to revolutionise that quite extensively.
Thank you, Andrew. And I think it's not just a question of technology, it's about people and organisational structure, and we'll come onto that point a little bit later on. Something I should have mentioned at the start of the webinar was to please do submit your questions. I've noticed a couple of questions have actually come in through the Q&A box on the WebEx site, so please do ask questions, and we will attempt to answer all those questions towards the end of this short presentation. So just moving on in terms of key finding about payments as part of the omnichannel strategy. We've always kind of advocated that actually payment, and we're bound to do this because we're payment consultants, but payment acceptance strategy is not really an afterthought. It's not a bolt-on. It should be central to the retailer's operation. I think we are increasingly seeing the importance of payments as being part of the core omnichannel strategy. And I think one of the key drivers this year, and we've seen it over a few years, this talk about customer experience, and we added this in option within the question about what is the key driver of developing a new payments acceptance strategy. And we quite often found that it's around adding more payment options, increasing the sales, whether it's in store or online, or reducing fraud. Those type of things were coming up. But this year is really head and shoulders above the rest, is improving customer experience. And I think it's for the first time that we've seen this very, very clear driver from the participants, and it's a question of it is a driver of change. I think it's very interesting. I think, Andrew, interesting to hear your point from an after sales point of view and some of the challenges around exceptions and refunds, and from what you've seen within your area.
Absolutely. I think when you talk about payment is at the heart of the strategy, I think the real push for all retailers is to make the payment experience completely seamless. So it needs to be almost invisible. But to achieve that, it requires quite often some radical rethinking about how things are structured. So we're absolutely seeing evidence of that with retailers. And I think a lot of the drive for that is coming from the competitive landscape which they're in. We all know that the customers have huge options now in terms of where they can buy their goods from. So retailers, to stay relevant, have to ensure that the payment experience is seamless, but also that they have a very effective way of tracking the exceptions, and that quite often it's how the exceptions are managed is what that retailer then gets known for, and I think that's a critical point moving forward for any retailer.
I think that's a good point, Andrew. I think it's a question of customer experience. Again, the key driver is to improve the customer experience. I think retailers are challenged in that there's new technologies, there's new solutions. The customer expectations are high. They've experienced the Apple experience and the Amazon experience. They want to be able to experience the same service or level of service in their other retail outlets. And competition is always there in the high street and online. It's easy to flip to another provider where customer experience might be better. Let's just move on to where we, kind of a key area was around working with third parties. 3 years ago when we did this survey, we found, I think it was 60% of participants surveyed said that they were working with third-party specialists to address their payment needs. Now that is 84%, and I think it's indicative of the nature of the market now. And we've got to remind ourselves this is a European point of view. The same pie chart would be quite different in, say, North America or LATAM or Asia Pacific. But from a European perspective, I think this is very reflective of the challenges around PCI DSS compliance, the need to work with third parties to be able to address and de-scope PCI. I think it also is questionable around terminal agnosticity and acquirer relationships. I'd be interested to hear your views on that.
Yeah, I think you could cut this in many ways. I think a traditional bricks and mortar retailer, de facto, if they're moving into the CNP space, the chances are they're going to have to be relying on a third party. So that's kind of one model where you would heavily rely on a third party. But then equally, as those payment solutions have evolved, so you would have your traditional bricks and mortar, you might have CNP, you may have other forms of payment, other channels. I think the retailers are then looking and saying, hold on a minute, we may well be doing this in-house, or we may be doing some of this in-house. Does it not make sense to have a holistic picture of how we manage this to certainly optimize costs, but also to address some of the things which have been alluded to in this presentation previously around enhancing customer experience to make sure that they manage the whole refunds process properly and so forth. So I think the reality is what happens is a number of these factors come together, and it quite often is things like security, PCI DSS, which is the trigger for that, but it effectively comes together so that then the retailer will say, hold on, let's revolutionize completely what we do. And then that starts a whole other debate, that maybe then things as far-fetched as, well, actually, maybe we should be acquiring our own transactions or something. I think there's different scales of working with third parties, but, the absolute evidence of that is certainly we're seeing that, on the ground in the direct discussions we're having with retailers, so no doubt about that whatsoever. And I think for the larger retailers, as you alluded to, when they put everything together, they start thinking about, well, actually, if we do want to optimize our costs, we maybe want to optimize the costs of our hardware. We may want to look at our acquiring costs to see if that can be optimized in some way. So therefore, having solutions which enable that to happen becomes, the cornerstone of what they want to do.
Andrew, do you think it's a question of that life for the retailer is a lot more complex?
I think so. Yeah, I think the regulatory environment which retailers now have to work in is a lot more complex than it was 5-10 years ago. The competitive environment is now far more complex than it was, even 2 or 3 years ago. So, retailers have pressures around their costs, which they're constantly trying to optimize. So I think, it's the reality, and that's not going to change. It's going to get even more complex. So being able to effectively pass on much, if not all, of that responsibility to third parties is seen for many as being quite appealing, because it diminishes their workload and should diminish their costs associated with managing payments.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to go on to the next slide and just talk about some of the customer experience changes that we're seeing from the survey. From a retailer's point of view, taking advantage of new technologies as they come along, and we've found there's a lot of talk about mobile wallets and social commerce, open APIs and wearables and Internet of Things and beacons, etc. And I think retailers are, to your point earlier, is a little bit overwhelmed by this complexity. And I think we've found change within payment acceptance just in the last 5 years has been, unprecedented compared to the previous 50 years. And I think, that drives, a lot of the change around looking at third-party relationships and specialist companies. But in terms of, let me just pick up on within the survey, 48% of the participants were actively looking at mobile wallets or developing them. And this is beyond the likes of Apple Pay, Samsung Pay, Android Pay. This is really a lot of interest from creating new wallets, new payment solutions. Larger retailers are looking at this, or even groups of smaller retailers are combining their solutions. There's activities in the French market, Auchan, Carrefour and Total, working together. Tesco's, a single grocery retailer, large grocery retailer, have developed their own QR-based mobile wallet. And I think other retailers are actively looking at this. I think one of the drivers is really we're seeing convergence between payment and loyalty. And is there a way of bringing that together around the mobile wallet? And that could be a great way of achieving this. I think beacons, in terms of a new technology, we've seen there's some interest. It tends to be a little bit niche. As we've seen from the survey, only 7% of participants said that they were taking advantage of beacon technology. We have seen it in sporting venues, bars and hospitality are experimenting, but not necessarily to do with payment, but it could be more to do with marketing initiatives, sending messages, targeted messages to consumers that they're aware of, or using the app that they may be associated with the actual venue. Andrew, some of the influencing factors, how we're expecting the future retail, it has been quite, which is already mentioned, cross-channel integration and the need for seamless and a consistent view of the consumer across those channels, and that's a resounding 79% from the participants. But it's interesting to look at immediate payments and in-app payments, which took me by surprise slightly, particularly in the UK, where there isn't necessarily an immediate payment solution for retailers as of this point in time. But I mean, what's your view on that? 59%, coming up.
I think I share your observation there that it's surprising that that's so high, given that it's still relatively new. But I think merchants are actively looking, and this is not just specific to the UK. We're seeing strong evidence of this with international groups working across Europe, but also globally. It's part of this the challenge which they're all facing around how do you stay close to your customers, how do you provide new ways of doing things to keep them loyal. And I think immediate payment stands out there because it, deployed in the right way, it has the potential to revolutionize the way in which payments are done within a retail space. However, and this is, I think the thing that a lot of retailers are trying to grapple with is, how is that deployed in a way that it provides obviously clear benefits to the retailer, but specific advantages for the consumer. And I think that ties in with what you alluded to earlier around things like mobile wallets, because if you combine things like immediate payments or other payment solutions with a mobile wallet, all of a sudden you can facilitate transactions and provide benefit to the consumer for routing transactions in a particular way, which benefits the consumer maybe in terms of additional points or savings, but clearly also benefits the retailer in terms of cost savings. So I think I would view this more as something where the retailers are looking at new ways of doing things to address those points that we discussed earlier.
Okay, thank you. And as conscious, we want to leave some time for questions, and we've had quite a few questions coming in. And just want to pick up on one of the questions relevant to that particular slide. Is that the question was, which mobile wallets do you see are the most used? I mean, trying to get figures around Apple Pay is a very, very difficult phenomenon. I'm aware that the London Transport have statistics and have released some of those statistics around the take-up of Apple Pay and Android Pay at the turnstiles in terms of accessing the underground and other transport systems within London, and it has shown a steady growth, but I think it's probably because it's from a very, very small base, not as quick as comprehensive as something like contactless cards on Visa or MasterCard. But I think getting statistics around the main players is very, very difficult. I know Tesco's talk about their PayQuick wallets as being highly successful. I suspect they're bound to say that, but I think combining with their loyalty offering is very compelling. And so therefore, as long as you've got a wallet that is compelling for the consumer to encourage them to use it, to your point, it's not just about payment. It has to be, other things as an incentive. It's not, So I don't know what your view is on that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have the detailed data there to share on which solutions are working. What I will say is we are seeing a lot of our merchant base actively embracing things like loyalty solutions and seeking to combine those with wallets.
Okay.
So and that may effectively end up being what could almost be like a closed loop just for that merchant, but for that merchant it may well be absolutely appropriate and very successful. So the trend is there, and I think it's a generational thing as well, right? So I think the younger the generation, the more likely that they're going to embrace these types of solutions.
And talking about the future, we've had a question about. Do you think in the next 3 to 5 years, do you think there'll be a distinction between card not present and card present?
It's a big debate, and I certainly came out of a meeting this morning where we were discussing this, internally. I think there are some fundamental differences between card not present and card present, especially when you're dealing with the complexity associated with certainly some of the tier 1 retailers and what they have. I think there will be over time, an increasing amount of grey areas between card present and CNP. That's for sure. And I think you will start to see things like traditional C&P transactions being done in store, and that will only continue, which is a good thing. So I suspect over time it will become one, but it's all effectively all around volume and where the volume's coming from.
And which nicely dovetails into another question around the PIN entry device, the actual PED itself, the actual piece of hardware. And I think the question is the PED dead as a result of the retailers looking at new points of interaction, e.g. tablets, PIN on glass, smartphones, things like that?
So I think this is another big debate within the industry. I think, and things are moving very, very fast. And I think Europe there is actually quite interesting because effectively the traditional way in which things have been done is being revolutionized a lot. So I think it will certainly become commoditized over time, and I think that's you can see strong evidence of that in what's happening in the market. Whether the PED itself is dead, I think there will always be space for the PED in certain environments, but I think there are other solutions which retailers will seek to adopt, which mean that the way we traditionally transacted may well change. So, it's reality that you could use a tablet device to do payments in certain verticals, and I see that increasing over time and even getting into the traditional high throughput verticals as well.
Right. Okay, that's interesting. In terms of customer experience coming up so strongly in this year's survey and the importance of customer experience from a retailer's point of view, why do you think that is? Why is it more relevant today than it ever was in the previous years?
I think it comes back to the points we touched on really in the earlier part of the presentation, that how a retailer manages the exceptions is all part of customer experience and what that retailer is known for. Previously, potentially retailers had faced a less competitive environment. That is no longer the case. Bricks and mortar is under a lot of pressure from all angles. So I think being able to provide solutions which address all the areas where a customer may interact with a retailer is paramount, and ensuring that is completely seamless is going to become more and more important.
Okay, we've just got a couple more minutes for the webinar. Thank you very much for all the questions coming in. One of them was around, do you think customers will continue to change the way they pay? And, I think the question goes on about, as the second part of this question, we have never seen so much change at the points of interaction in the last 5 years. So, do you think customers will continue to change the way they pay?
I think they will. And there's two. One of them is going to be demanded by consumers. Some of it will be imposed on retailers and all of us by regulatory changes in regulatory environments where it provides consumers with more choice. And then there will be, separate initiatives which will isolate initiatives which may well, carry favour. So
contactless?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
There's a question around PCI. PCI is consistent in that it always changes. So the question is, so if it continues to change, it could become so restrictive and so expensive to achieve any improvement in the customers, retailers, and the consumers' experience. I think I understand the question. I think the question is around, if PCI is so expensive, could it restrict some of the innovation and change that retailers want to have for their customer experience?
Yeah, I think there's always the risk, isn't there? But then the flip side to that is things like PCI are there for very good reasons. we've all seen, and have been very well publicised, the issues relating to fraud and things like being able to provide solutions which tokenize the transaction data. I think ultimately will address a lot of the issues that the PCI has raised, but will do that in a way which is cost effective for a lot of retailers. So there's always the challenge with the PCI and other regulatory bodies that will impede development, but there are solutions that can be put in place which enable those PCI issues to be addressed.
Okay. We're slightly running out of time, and we've got a few questions that we haven't answered, but we will try and endeavour to respond to those over the next day or two via email. What I'd like to do is thank you, Andrew Quartermain, for attending and supporting the survey this year and answering some of the questions from the participants on the webinar. I think in summary, I think the PED is not yet dead. Omnichannel is here, and it looks as though it's not a passing phase. It's something that will deliver real tangible benefits for retailers and their consumers. Payment is certainly a heart of any retailer's strategy, and the challenges still exist, such as data integration, organisational change. They remain to be challenges, and PCI compliance, just to name a few. So I'm going to bring the webinar to a close. I think thank you for all your questions and attending today's webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you.